Here we're on Daf Lamed on base. Nafkamina legite noshim. Okay, what's gite noshim? This has to do with what's called befanai nechtav ubefanai nechtav. Are you familiar with that? It means that when a shliach brings a get, he has to clarify two things. Number one, that it's not counterfeit, meaning that he saw the eidim that are signed on the get sign on the get. There was no hanky-panky here. And there was no counterfeit. It's authentic. The signatures are authentic. And number two, he has to establish that it was written lishma. And back in the day, there was such amaratzis that a lot of people had no clue that a get has to be written lishma. Lishma means l'shema ish, l'shema isha, for him and for her. And for example, you could have a get that says Yaakov is divorcing Rachel, but it's a different Yaakov who's divorcing a different Rachel. It's got to be written l'shem this Yaakov and this Rachel. You can't just borrow a get that happen to have the same names. So you need b'fanei nechta, b'fanei nechta. But the Gemara says that in Eretz Yisrael, from one place to another, we can rely on the fact that if there's any question about the authenticity of the signatures, then shayaras mitzuyos, which means that there are plenty of people going this far, that, they go from Dan to Beersheba, we'll be able to find, if there's a question about the signatures, a way of verifying the signatures. We don't need b'fanei nechta, b'fanei nechta. You're asking about Lishma. In Eretz Yisrael, they were Bekiyim. Every Jew understood that a get has to be written Lishma. We don't need extra testimony. Bavel has the same status as Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because there were constant shayaras going from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael and back and forth. Hence, we have all the Gemaras about Ravin and Avdimi, coming back and forth. And not only that, but the scholarship level and knowledge in Bavel was equal, if not beyond, that of Eretz Yisrael. So we have no need for B'fanei nechta and B'fanei nechta. But you have to know that the get came from Bavel. And they're telling you that this get came from Borsif. The people in Borsif were Amaratz. They did, so we should require B'fanei nechta, B'fanei nechta. The answer is, back in the day, before the Churban Habayis, if this get came from Borsif, make sure that Shliach recites that holy recitation, the formulation of B'fanei nechta. But today, if they tell you the get came from Bavel, then you're going to require B'fanei nechta, B'fanei nechta. If it came from Borsif, you don't require B'fanei nechta because Borsif is really Bavel. All right, we're up to the Mishnah. Yishmael Omer Shlosha Hadasim. We require a minimum of 3 Hadasim. Not less than 3 will do. Ushtei Aravos. 1 Arav is not enough. That's Rabbi Yishmael. Lulav Echav Esrogel. With regard to a lulav and an esrog, the Torah clearly indicates in the singular that all you need is 1. Now, Rabbi Yishmael goes back to his requirement of Hadassah. And this is going to confuse us. Because Rabbi Yishmael just went on record as requiring how many Hadassim? 3 Hadassim. And yet, Afilu Shnayim Ketubim v'Echad Eino Katuv. 1 has the head chopped off. 2 have the head chopped off. He's got 1 hadas that's kosher. That's Eino Katuv. It's in its original state. It's not chaser. It's not missing anything. But wait a second. You just finished telling me, Rabbi Yishmael, that I need 3 hadassim. Well, what are you telling me? You tell me I need 1 hadas and 2 psulim? I mean, what? That's crazy.
Maybe it's the video.
If that be the case, then you'd have to convince me that when Rabbi Yishmael said in his initial statement that you require 3 hadassim, that was only like an embellishment to the mitzvah. But the Gemara understands that when Rabbi Yishmael made the statement shlosh hadassim, he means to say you need shlosh hadassim. So how does he accept 2 minutes? Not only that, 2, the majority of his 3 hadassim are ketubim. And the Gemara is going to rack its brain, so to speak, to come up with some interpretation of Rabbi Tarfon Omer. Afilu shlosham ketubim. He doesn't recognize the psul of ketubim, and therefore I couldn't care less if all three are ketubim. I agree with you, Rabbi Yishmael says, Rabbi Tarfon, we need three hadassim, that's for sure. But don't talk to me about ketubim. Ketubim is efes, is zero. So you need all three to be ketubim. And now we have the shita of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says the number one is the key number. Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Is Kshem Shalulav Echad, the Esrog Echad, Kachadas Echad, V'Arov Achas. I mean, the Torah combines all of these in one pasuk. You'll say it says Arvei Nachal. Okay, that's coming to include Aravas that grow on a field. It's coming to include that Gila Arava. I don't know, whatever you'll derive from the plural of the word Arvei. But the fact that the Torah puts Aravas together with the Esrog, the Pre-Eitz Hadar, and the Kapas Tmarim means all you need is one.
Passing is also in Torah.
So let's read the pasuk. It says L'kachtem lochem b'yom harishon Pre-Eitz Hadar in the singular. That's the Esrog. Kapos Tmarim. Again, the Gemara says that it says kapos without a vav. Had it said kapos with a vav mole, that would imply two. You'd have to take two lulav. Imagine two lulav. And some people make a big profit on it. But I mean, do you gentlemen know about the Lower East Side of Manhattan? Those who remember the Lower East Side of Manhattan, that's where you went for your dollar medium in those days. And today, in Yerushalayim, every other block they're selling a dollar medium. Two lulavim. It says kapos tomorrow. No. Kapos tomorrow. It's written kapos without a vav. And then it says anaf eitz avos. Eitz avos we know is a hadas. And it says anaf in the singular. But it says arei nachal in the plural. It says Rabbi Akiva kishem. Kishem means we have to equalize it. It's always one. God is the one. He is the one. You remember that song? Okay. Anyway, so that's Rabbi Akiva. Again, in the market, they don't like Rabbi Akiva. They're not the pro Rabbi Akiva. Well, actually, you know what? You might as well jack up the price because it doesn't matter how many lulavim you have to buy, but you need one lulav. So I'm going to charge you an arm and a leg for a lulav. We're going to have a whole sugi about Shmuel. Shmuel is going to pressure the sellers because they were jacking up their prices. And it's an amazing sugi about how Shmuel is going to use the halacha to pressure the merchants. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, Omer, Pre-Eitz Hadar Echad, Kapos Tmarim Echad, again, because it says it kapos without a vav, and anaf eitz avos. This is already adasim, right? Avos is the braided. You remember that we discussed it has to be one level on top of the other, and so forth and so on. And he says shlosha. Now, how does he get the number 3 from the pasuk anaf eitz avos? This is fascinating. He takes this pasuk or this phrase and he divides it into 3 parts. There's anaf, there's eitz, and there's avos. 1, 2, 3. And that's how he derives the minimum requirement of Hadassah. Again, this is Rabbi Yishmael. This is the same Rabbi Yishmael who tells me that 2 out of 3 of Hadassah are Ketubim. In any event, Arvei Nachal, Shtayim. So forget about all those drushes, that Arvei tells you this kind of willow and that kind of willow. It says Arvei, take 2 willows. Don't be an Ibrachafim. Okay, the Gemara right away is going to attack Rabbi Tarfon. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Shlosha, Afilu Shlosha Ketumin. As we said before, he doesn't have a psul of Ketumin. Probably because it's Katum in a way that the leaves almost cover and camouflage that which is clipped off. So it still retains its status as Adam. Period. Now here you have to press the return button. You know what I mean by the return button? Right? Because we have a new paragraph. In my Gemara, it doesn't appear as a new paragraph. Right? So you think that Omar Lo Rabbi Lezer is arguing against Rabbi Akiva. That's not so. It's a new paragraph. Omar Lo Rabbi Akiva, shall we assume that since Esro, creates Hadar, is mentioned as the first of the four minim in one fell swoop, it means they all require aguda achas. And apparently, Rabbi Eliezer reflects the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Who remembers Rabbi Yehuda? No, not that one. Very good. Excellent. Yes. No, it's aguda, not a political statement, right? Rabbi Yehuda says that just like in Agudas Ezel, for the purpose of mechatas, it says aguda. So too, and it says l'kachtem lachem agudas Ezel. So too, with regard to Dalminu, it says l'kachtem lachem b'yom harishon. And he has Xer Shavu L'kachtem to teach you that it all has to be Ba'aguda Achas. So why not add the Esrog? Could you imagine? We're going to have to tie the Esrog around to the four, to the other three meaning. Amrit. But if you read the pasuk really carefully with a magnifying glass, you'll get the answer. V'chinemar pre-eitz hadar v'kapos tmorim. Is there a vav hamachaber? Right, it says ve'anaf eitz of ve'arvei nachal after the lulav. The vav tells you to bind it together, but after the pre-eitz hadar, it says kapos tmar. It doesn't say ve or u kapos tmar, which would imply a vav hamachaber. So the esrog really in the pasuk is separated from the other three meaning. The other three meaning, vav, they're all together. But the esrog is alone. Sometimes the tzaddik has to be alone. All right. Valolo nemar el kapos. It doesn't say u kapos. Uminayin shema akvim zed zed. How do you know that if you only have 3 out of 4? I mean, this to our ears, this sounds so strange. But back in the day, I'm telling you, Rabbosan, my father told me in his shtetl there was one set of daled meaning for the entire shtetl, and there were many years they didn't even have one set in the entire plisa. That's where my father came from. Here you have to look at Rashi. Rashi says Tama Shlema Bidarish Ulakachta Tam. Did you see what Rashi did? He took one word and he split it in half. Ulakachta tam. And tam means it's got to be complete. Tam is complete. It's not missing anything. You need all 4. And this halach applies all 7 days of Sukkot, even though the balance of Sukkot is only D'Rabbanan, you may remember, Zeichel Mikdash, but you've got to have a lakicha tam. Otherwise, there's no lakicha. I don't understand Rabbi Yishmael. If Rabbi Yishmael accepts the opinion, if he rejects the opinion of Rabbi Tarfon was the one who said that even if part of the hadas is cut off, niktam rosho, it's still kosher. But if Rabbi Tarfon requires shlema, and at least one of the 3 hadasim requires shlema, is liboy le'amikulu. All 3 should require shleim. If he agrees with Rabbi Tarfon, and there's no psul, it's not absolutely critical, and it doesn't disqualify the hadas if it's niktav, then afilu chad nami lo miboy. I added a word, right? We shouldn't even require one of the hadasim to be shleim. Omar Bira, Omar Rabbi Ali. Chazar bo Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael had one position, and then he rescinded his original position. Happens more often than we think in Shas. So Rabbi Tarfon initially thought you need 3 hadas, in which case, even if one of the 3 was niktam, was clipped off, it would be possible. because he's only got 2 hadassim and he needs 3. But he changed his mind. And Lamaskana, his final conclusion was that all you need is 1 hadas. So now we have Mendel's question. You need 1 hadas. Why are you adding 2 more hadassim, which are psulim? They're niktam, and they're worthless. So the Ran has an amazing pshat over here. He says only 1 hadas is required, but he wants to enhance the mitzvah. So he should take 3 hadas. Rabbi say, have you ever seen a Yemenite? Daled Minim? How many hadasim they have? I don't know. They probably have some Kabbalistic number. I don't know. About also? Yeah. How many? It's a special number? 30. Ah.
A lot of people put 6.
But there must be some significance to those numbers. I'll pick up both. I have a feeling that the Yemenites are close to 30. I don't know. I don't know if they're 30, but it's amazing how many hadasim. So although there may be a minimum requirement for hadasim, either 1 or 3, but there's no max. And the answer is the more hadasim you put in, the more beautiful it is. Again, I'm not advocating that you should add hadasim unless you've got that minimum. And Rabbi Yishmael actually codified a minimum to add another 2 hadasim to round it off into number 3. He didn't go as far as 6 or 30, but 3. And those other 2 hadasim are only there to embellish the beautiful hadasim. And he felt that if niktam, which is technically possible, but since the leaves sort of cover up and camouflage that part which is clipped, it still enhances your mitzvah. Again, Rabbi Shmuel would be absolutely thrilled if you had 3 kosher hadasim. Shleiman. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel halacha ki Rabbi Tarfon, means that niktam is kosher, and that's the way the Rosh Paskins, the Rif Paskins, the Rambam Paskins, because the Gemara says explicitly halacha ki Rabbi Tarfon. That's a tremendous coup. However, it's always a however, and that's the Ravid. The Ravid says that to paskin like Rabbi Tarfon and niktam is kosher is divrei, what does he call it? I have it here in the footnote. He calls it ruach hakodesh. Ruach hakodesh to say such. We don't paskin based on ruach hakodesh. So the Ravid is in trouble. The Gemara says explicitly halacha Rabbi Tarfon, and yet the Ravid and the Balamor, by the way, asils niktam. Rabbi Tarfon says niktam is kosher. So the Ravid says that there's niktam of the Mishnah and there's niktam of the Gemara. It depends where it was niktam. Was it on the top of the hadas or on the bottom of the hadas? The Mishnah, when it completely disqualifies niktam, means that the top of the hadas was cut off, was clipped, and that's possible. And if you're going to tell me that's kosher, that's divrei nevi'im. That's ruach hakodesh. We don't pass like ruach hakodesh. However, our Gemara of Rabbi Tarfon, that's talking about a case where the stems that come out of the hadas were clipped, not the top. A hadas is made up of many levels, some of which will protrude, and by accident, he clipped the top of these protruding stems. That's not possible. But don't forget the Mishnah. Mishnah says niktam is always possible. Always meaning in all the Talmud, even in hadas, despite any sort of camouflage. But that's because it was niktam roshan. It was clipped on top. Remember, I told you that Shmuel would pressure the merchants who were jacking up the prices. And he warned them. He says, Ashvu v'zabinu. Ashvu means equal out your price. Give a fair price. And don't, how should I say, squeeze the people for the money. The elo, and I'm warning you, if you don't shape up and lower your prices, the Rishna Lechu, I'm going to get up in shul, in the main shul of Pumbedisa, and I'm going to declare halacha k'Rabbi Tarfon. And if the halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon, then who's gonna pay big money for Hadassim? Hadassim are a dime a dozen. The problem with Hadassim is that very often Hadassim are niktam. But Rabbi Tarfon says that niktam is kosher. So Shmuel says, I got it over you. I got it over the barrel. If you don't lower your prices, and especially the Hadassim. Today, I think it's the Esra, the Lulav. I don't know which is the top banana. But if you want Hadassim, you pay some good money. Remember, they get you the Tzfas Hadassim, you know what I'm talking about? And you pay through the nose. And Shmuel says, you know what? You're paying through the nose because we don't want to buy clipped Hadassim. And it's very hard to find Shleiman. I'm going to paskin publicly like Rabbi Tarf. So the Gemara says, if Shmuel is just using this as a threat, I'm going to threaten you and I'm going to pass like Rabbi Tarf against the normative halacha, the accepted halacha. So why should he go even further? Lidrash Luke, Rabbi Akiva, the Bekel Tfei. Rabbi Akiva holds that all you need is one adas. Why don't you use that as a threat? So the Gemara answers, it's more difficult to find a 3 adassim that are shchiche means that it's easy to find. It's easy to find 3 adassim that are ketubim, but chad v'lo katuv lo shtia. So if he really wants to pressure them, he's going to tell them, you won't find, you don't have to find something that's low katuv, because low katuv is low shtia. It's very hard to find the hadas, even one single hadas that's low. Mishnah says, Esra gagozul vayovesh pasul. And this we've seen over and over again with the Mishnah, shal ashera, shal iridachas pasul. We need lachem, it's not lachem, and it's got to have moisture, and it can't be ketuse mechtash yuri because of avodah zarah. I mean, I'm not going to go over this because Rav Osei, we've had it already twice. This is the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. But here's a chiddush in esrog. Esrog is the only one of the 4 species that's edible. And shal orla pasul, that's not edible. During the first 3 years of the production of any fruit on any tree in Eretz Yisrael, it's called orla. It's pasul. It's also even bahano. You're not even benefit. Shall truma tmeya pasul. Again, the Gemara is going to go through every one of these to explain them. So you have truma tmeya pasul. Shall truma tahora. You have an esrog of truma. Lo yito. Avoid it. It's too tricky. But if not al kosher, there's nothing possible. I mean, truma is eaten by Kohen, so it's edible. And if an esrog has to be edible, because the Torah calls it a pre-eitz hadar, then this esrog is edible. Masechet truma tmeya is not edible. You have to burn it. What's the story with mai? Mai is aser b'achila to you and I, but it's mutar b'achila for the aniyim, the poor people are allowed to eat mai. Beit Shammai poslim. Beit Shammai says not everyone could eat mai, and therefore the esrog is not edible, and it's possible. Beisil machshir. Beisil say, well, we still have the aniyim, so that means it's potentially mutar b'achila. Shal meiser sheni b'Yerushalayim, right? You have meiser sheni on the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years of the Shemitah cycle. You bring it to Yerushalayim, you eat it in Yerushalayim, so it's edible in Yerushalayim. Take your esrog to Yerushalayim, and there you could use it for lekachtem lechem pre-eitz hadar, because there in Yerushalayim it's edible. But nevertheless, lo yitovim not al kosher. We don't want you to take meiser sheni because meiser sheni should be used for achila, and you shouldn't benefit from it in any other way. Although we have a principle called mitzvahs lav lehenos nitnu, so technically he's not being nene from it by being mekayim his mitzvah, but lechatchila we want to avoid. Now we have a list of cases where the esrog is possible. Also chazazis al ruba. So in the Hebrew, he says chazazis are etzbos. He has a nice picture. I'm sure you have a nice picture too of chazis. Okay, ooh, really looks ugly. If anybody wants to see this picture, colored picture, top left, you'll take a look. It's kind of like bubbles. Why? Again, in Hebrew they call it etzba'ot because the etzba is a certain shape. It's on an esrog, it's very disgusting, and it raises above the outer peel of the esrog. And it's all over the place. By the way, this has nothing to do with what we call Yiddish bletlach. You know what bletlach are, those little black dots? Those are in the skin of the esrog. They don't rise above the skin line. And that's considered natural. That's the way esrogim grow. This is very unnatural. Nitla pitma, so the pitum was removed, or niklaf, the outer peel, the covering over the esrog was removed. Nistak, you have a split in the esrog, or nikev, bechasakolchu, a needle went into the esrog, and a small piece of the esrog is missing. Possible. Also, chazos al miyut, however, in contrast, if let's say these boils are only in part of the esrog, or nital ukzo, the oketz is the bottom, that little piece on the bottom of the esrog, that falls off. Or nikev velo chaser kol shu, you punctured it, but nothing was taken out of the esrog is still whole, kosher. Esrog akushi, which Rashi says is an esrog that came from Kush, and it's dark in color. Interesting, the people are dark and the esrog is dark. I don't know if there's any connection. Maybe because the sun, it's near the equator, and it's possible. And that's called a shinui mara. It looks different than an esrog. By Yoro Kikarsi, that's going to be a machlokas. Rabbi Meir Machshir, Rabbi Yehuda posted. Rabbi Yehuda thinks that this is such an immature esrog that if you cut it down from the tree, it'll never mature. It'll always remain a dark green. However, we passing like Rabbi Meir that even a green esrog might be developed enough, may take a little longer time. They say put it in a box with an apple. You know what I'm talking about? All the grandmother's recommendations, and it'll turn yellow. Sheer esrog cotton is a major machlokas about what is the minimum size of an esrog, because if the esrog is small, then we think it never will develop, and it doesn't have the status of pre-eitz hadam. Is Rabbi Meir Omer ke'egos? It's enough if it's the small size of a walnut. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ke'beitza, it's got to be much larger. It has to be the size of an egg, because Rabbi Yehuda thinks that there's another issue with regard to a very small esrog. And that is that even if it has the color of an esrog, but if it's so small, it's less than an egg size, it's not fully developed. And it was taken off the tree prematurely. Rabbi Yossi, I'm sorry, I skipped. What is the maximum size? Oh, Sam Schneider. He'd be alive today, he'd be 150. Sam Schneider used to every year come to the shul with an esrog. I think it's also Yemenite. Like a soccer ball. This was his way of showing off. I got the biggest esrog in the shul. Welcome to America. I'm telling you a story from my youth, so probably 60 years ago. Good old Sam. Oh, I love him. Anyway, so here we have a machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says there's no shir lamala, there's no maximum size of an esrog. As large as it is kosher. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Ubegadol, if it's a very large esrog, it's kadesh yochas shnayim biyad. If you can take two esrogim and hold them in one hand, they are ksherim. If you can't, because one of the two is very large, and if you hold on to one esrog, the other one is so large it's going to fall, then it's possible. And there are two approaches to understanding Rabbi Yehuda. Let's take one approach for today, because we'll develop this in the sugi itself, in Mirz Hashem tomorrow, and that is that Rabbi Yehuda understands that ulakachad lachem requires that you take the esrog in one hand and the lulav in another hand. Okay, so you take the lulav in the right hand, the esrog in the left hand. And if the esrog is very large, then what's going to happen is if he took it in the right hand, because it's so large, he's going to have to switch it over to his left hand. In the meantime, the esrog is going to fall and it's going to become possible. That's what he's afraid of. Okay, then we're both like, this is where we're going to stop. And tomorrow we start Lamed Hey from, as we say, take it from the top. Thank you so much.